Beyond the rainforests, beyond the mountains, and beyond passed down through generations, lies a history many have forgotten, the untold history of Borneo.
The history of Borneo keeps a dark secret. A journey that was never meant to be saved. More than 2,000 people were forced to walk across the forest of Borneo. If they fall, they won't get up again. The journey begins in Sandakan and ends in a place that is only filled with silence and death, and today, only a few people are still alive to tell what really happened. This is not a legend. This is a true story that happened in Borneo.
In the year 1942, the Second World War brought great changes to Borneo. North Borneo, now known as Sabah, is under the Japanese administration. Not long after, Sandakan developed into one of the important operation centers in Borneo. An airfield was built, a stronghold was strengthened, and thousands of prisoners of war were stationed in the area to help with various construction works. Without them knowing, this event became the beginning of a story that is still remembered to this day.
These prisoners consist of Australian and British soldiers who were captured after the fall of Singapore and the war campaign in Southeast Asia. They were forced to build a military airfield under very strict supervision. Every day they work from morning to evening with very little food. The disease began to spread, the body became weaker, but the work continued without mercy. Many believe that if they continue to survive, the war will end and they can finally return to their homeland. However, what awaits them is far more terrifying than what they ever imagined. In early 1945, when the armed forces approached Borneo, the Japanese made a decision that would change history forever. They directed all prisoners to be transferred by walking across the forests of Borneo. Towards the beginning of the year 1945, the war began to change direction. The armed forces are getting closer to Borneo, and the Japanese are starting to realize that their position is increasingly threatened. The food supply is decreasing. Sea routes are getting harder to use, and airstrikes are getting more frequent. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sandakan began to face a serious supply shortage. In an increasingly urgent situation, a new directive was issued. All prisoners will be transferred to Ranau, an area in the interior of Sabah. The distance exceeds 250 kilometers, crossing thick forests, torrential rivers, and hilly areas. No one knows whether they will get to their destination or won't come back. The journey finally begins. On that gloomy morning, hundreds of prisoners began to march. They are only allowed to bring the most basic items. No one is told how far this journey is or what awaits them ahead. Their first step, leaving Kem Sandakan, is the beginning of a journey that will be remembered as Sandakan Death March.
In front of them stretches more than 250 kilometers of paths filled with thick forests, rivers, hills, and mud. Every step becomes heavier. Many prisoners are already weak due to lack of food and disease, but the journey continues without much choice.
The forest of Borneo is not just vast. The weather is hot and humid. It rains unexpectedly. While the narrow path is filled with tree roots and steep creeks, every day they walk for hours. The food supply is decreasing, and clean water is difficult to obtain. Tiring is starting to take over every step. Even so, there are still people who help each other. They share leftovers, lift weaker friends, and encourage them to keep moving. 28th of January 1945. The first group of nearly 470 prisoners was directed to leave the Sandakan camp. They were given very limited supplies and ordered to go to Ranau, more than 250 kilometers from here.
At first, some of them still believed that this trip was just a transfer to another camp. No one thought that this trip would be remembered as Sandakan Death March. The route to Ranau is not an easy road. They were forced to pass the tropical rainforest, cross a fast river, and climb a steep stream, while carrying supplies on each other's shoulders.
The humid, hot weather and the rain that falls almost every day make the trip more challenging. The already weak body is now forced to face the challenges of nature that knows no mercy.
Day by day, the food supply is decreasing. Many began to experience extreme fatigue, while diseases spread more easily in a state of deficiency.
Even so, the spirit to continue living is still there. There are those who help friends who are getting weaker, share leftovers, and give each other strength to continue the journey.
The further they walk, the clearer it becomes that this journey is not just a transfer. Every kilometer brings a new challenge that tests their physical and mental endurance.
Not all of them are able to maintain the travel streak. Many are getting slower due to fatigue, while others are trying their best to keep moving forward.
When the first group finally arrived in Ranau, their situation was much different from when they left Sandakan. The long journey has left a deep impression on them, but the truth itself is darker after the arrival. However, the suffering is not over. A few months later, another group of prisoners will be forced to follow the same path. Dan Kedan Kali ini, Gal Bel Studio.
Even though the first group has arrived in Ranau, hundreds of prisoners are still in Kem Sandakan. Their condition is getting worse. Food supplies are decreasing, while the war continues to approach Borneo. Not everyone died on the road. Those who arrived in Ranau were directed to build a temporary camp, but the situation there is also very bad. By June 26th, only 5 Australians and 1 British from the first group were still alive in Ranau. On May 29, 1945, another order was issued. The second group, consisting of more than 500 prisoners, was directed to leave Sandakan and begin their journey to Ranau.
Many are already too weak before the journey begins. Every step requires tremendous strength, but they continue their journey with the hope of continuing to live.
For some of them, this journey never comes to an end. Towards the middle of 1945, only a small number were still able to continue the journey. But in Sandakan, there are still prisoners who have not left the camp. The situation is worse. Less supplies. Many did not have time to arrive in Ranau. Only about 183 people arrived in Ranau, but in a very weak state.
Ahead of June 1945, the situation at Kem Sandakan is getting more difficult. Many of the remaining prisoners are in a very weak state, but the war is not over yet. On the 9th of June 1945, the last group was directed to leave Sandakan. Unlike the previous group, most of them no longer have the same strength as before. This trip is the most challenging. The weaker physical condition, coupled with the difficult path, makes every step a very tough test. The last group left Sandakan. They are made up of prisoners who are already very weak. No one from the Third Death March group is known to have survived until the end of the journey. Many died along the route or shortly after in the Ranau area. Towards the end of the war, no one from this group was still alive. Sandakan Death Marches. When the war finally ended, only 6 members of the Australian Army survived. They escaped, finding help from the locals.
6 men who told the world. The 6 survivors were not from the Third Death March. They are: 2 people managed to escape when the second series of the parade. 4 more people fled from the Ranau area in July 1945, and everything was hidden and helped by the local Sabah residents so that the war ended. Their testimony is what revealed the Sandakan tragedy to the world.
Today, the path that has been traveled by prisoners is known as the Sandakan Memorial Route. He became a symbol of fortitude, sacrifice, and a reminder of an important chapter in the history of Borneo. Every year, local people and visitors from all over the world come to pay tribute to those who have gone through this journey. Their stories continue to live through historical records and efforts to preserve this legacy.
The Death Marches is not just a story about war. It is a story about human fortitude, hope that never goes out, and the importance of remembering history so that tragedies like this do not happen again. Behind the beauty of the Borneo forest, there is a story that will continue to be remembered throughout the ages.
The images you have just seen are real photographs connected to the Sandakan Death Marches. They serve as a reminder that behind every historical event were real people, real families, and real lives forever changed. May we remember their courage and never forget their sacrifice. lest we forget. Preserving Borneo's past for future generations.